Have you ever caught a whiff of someone's perfume that made your stomach turn? Not because it smelled bad, but because it brought back the worst memories. I was 42, she was 37. I was standing in the backyard, watering the silly bonsai tree my wife insisted on keeping, when I caught it, vanilla and jasmine with that sharp, fake edge. Holland's perfume, the one she used to say gave her headaches, just not enough to stop wearing it for someone else. At my feet, the white rose petals from last spring were falling, drying up in a I thought they looked like tiny, crumpled napkins, useless after a mess no one bothered to clean. Fitting, really. That's when the sliding glass door opened and she walked out, heels on, makeup flawless, hairpin like we were headed to a fancy dinner. But we weren't, not this time. Holland handed me a silver envelope. She didn't even meet my eyes. Her voice was as casual as asking me to grab some milk. I want to make things easy. No drama, just sign where I've highlighted. I didn't move. I just stared at the envelope. It even had a gold wax seal. She'd sealed our divorce papers like they were party invites. Divorce, I finally said. You're handing me divorce papers like a gift. Her lips twitched into a slight smile. You're welcome. I should have felt wrecked, maybe even devastated, but something else kicked in. I smiled, too, not out of happiness, but the way you do when a puzzle finally makes sense and you realize the picture was never what you thought. I slid the envelope back into her polished hand, looked her straight in the eye, and said, wait until your lover sees his envelope. Her face stayed still, but her hand jerked just a little, enough for me to know. Holland had no idea what I'd found. No clue I'd been getting my own surprise ready, quietly, carefully, waiting for her to slip. And she just did. Holland froze for half a second. She's good at hiding feelings, always was. But she's not perfect. I've studied her face longer than anything else. That tiny jot which that was fear. She quickly masked it, turning back to the kitchen as if I hadn't just dropped a bomb in her lap. I don't know what game you think you're playing, Darian, she said without turning. Her voice was sharp, clipped, cold as the metal on that divorce envelope. But we're done. You should be happy. You hated being married to me anyway. She wanted a reaction, but I didn't give her one. I just walked inside, calm, and opened the drawer by the coffee maker. I pulled out a plain white envelope. No gold seal, no drama, just quiet truth. Inside were 7 photos. Holland in yoga pants, wrapped around a man who wasn't me, kissing him outside a sleazy motel. I didn't even have to hire a private investigator. My phone automatically saved her photos. She'd made a folder called Wellness Retreat and forgotten to unlink our devices. The worst part? I wouldn't have even checked if she hadn't been acting so high and mighty for months. That first day I found the pictures, I just sat in my car for hours, staring at the dashboard. No crying, just stunned, like the ground beneath me turned to glass and I could see the cracks before it all broke. But I didn't confront her then. I waited. I collected every little piece, her excuses, the new lingerie receipts, hotel bookings that didn't match her work trips, even the text she forgot to erase. I feel alive when I'm with you. He never touches me the way you do. And then the one that really sealed it for me. Don't worry, he'll be out of the picture soon. So yeah, I smiled when she gave me those divorce papers, because the picture she thought she was painting wasn't even close to the one I'd already developed. Clear as day. As soon as she walked back into the kitchen, I gently set the plain white envelope down on the granite counter, right next to the quinoa salad she made just to post online but never actually ate. This one's for you, I said, using the same calm voice she had earlier. No drama, just the truth. I flipped to the last page. That one's my favorite. She narrowed her eyes and slowly opened the envelope, sliding out the papers like she already had a bad feeling about what was coming. With every photo she pulled out, her face changed, first bored, then confused, then frozen in horror. She didn't speak for a full minute. Her fingers shook slightly when she got to the final photo, her and her boyfriend, sitting shirtless in his car, her hand in his lap. I didn't say anything else. I didn't rub it in. I didn't scream. I just walked into the garage and popped open the overhead compartment where I had a suitcase already packed. I didn't know exactly when this moment would come, but I knew it would. She always said I wasn't spontaneous. Guess she was wrong about that too. When I came back inside, she was still staring at the pictures. I tossed my car keys onto the kitchen island. Oh, by the way, I said like it was no big deal. You might want to warn him about the texts about his name being on a lease application while you are still legally married to me. Pretty sure his wife will love that. Holland finally looked up at me, her face completely drained of color. What do you mean? His wife? She asked. I finally met her eyes. You didn't know? He's married too. 3 kids, lies out in Brighton with a golden retriever named Lucy. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Clarity. Not winning. Not revenge. Just peace. I walked out the front door without looking back, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. I drove for 2 hours with no real plan. The farther I got from that house, the lighter I felt. It was strange. Leaving behind 10 years of marriage should have caused some kind of emotional breakdown, but it didn't. No screaming in the car, No tears rolling down my face, no punching the steering wheel, just heavy, final silence. And under that, relief. I checked into a small lodge near Lake Roland, the kind of place that smells like old cedar and fireplace smoke, where the bed is tucked too tight and the coffee tastes like burnt dirt. But it had the one thing I needed most: privacy. The woman at the front desk, probably in her 60s, didn't ask any questions. She just handed me the key and said, "Hope you find what you're looking for." I didn't smile, I just nodded, because honestly, I didn't even know what I was looking for anymore. Back in the room, I opened my laptop and uploaded the files I'd been saving for months. Photos, screenshots of texts, location locks, no threats, no nasty comments, just plain evidence. I encrypted everything and saved it to 3 different drives. One went into my luggage, one into my glove box, and the third, I mailed to someone I hadn't spoken to in over 7 years, Holland's sister, Carol. Carol and I used to be close. She never liked Holland's need for attention, as she once put it. After the wedding, we lost touch. I never held it against her, but now she needed to see the truth about who her sister really was. I wasn't expecting anything back. I just wanted someone else to know, someone who wouldn't pretend all of this was somehow my fault. That night, my phone buzzed. Not a call, a text from a number I knew. "You smug little piece of trash. You think you want something? You're pathetic." I read it once, then deleted it. She was losing it. The calm, polished version of Holland was cracking, the version she showed the neighbors, her book club, her coworkers. That confident, put-together woman with the perfect Pinterest life was falling apart. And I knew why. Appearances meant everything to her, and I had just shattered the glass house she lived in. The next morning, while I was choking down a dry scone in the lodge cafe, I got another message from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk." I didn't know she was married. "Please." I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. "Then why were you in a hotel room with her while she still had my last name?" No response. 10 minutes went by. Then another message. "I made a mistake. Don't destroy me." That's when it hit me. He wasn't worried about me. He was scared for his own life, his family, his job. He had more to lose than Holland ever did. She had been reckless, but he had been stupid. And no, I had leverage. I didn't want revenge, but I wanted him to learn something Holland never understood. Actions have consequences, and when you treat people like they don't matter, sometimes the ones you toss aside land on their feet, and they don't forget. So I made a plan. I waited 2 days, long enough for Holland to stew in the unknown. Then I went back to the house. Not to move back in, just to grab a few last things. The driveway was empty, her car was gone, but what threw me off was the "for sale" sign on the front lawn. I hadn't filed anything yet. There it was. Holland had already put the house up for sale, before anything was even official. I walked inside. The whole place felt hollow. The furniture was still there, but her presence wasn't. No smell of her hairspray, no humming from the next room, just silence and dust. On the counter, there was a folder marked "Staging Photos." She had already hired a real estate agent. There was even a note taped to the fridge. "Darian, I assume you'll grab your tools and files by Friday. I've boxed up the rest. Don't contact me again." And taped right next to that, a selfie of her and him, grinning on a boat, holding champagne, like none of this ever happened. I picked up the photo, walked out to the fire pit in the backyard, lit a match, and dropped it in. It burned fast, curling their smiling faces into soft gray ash. It didn't make me feel better, but it made it feel finished. And sometimes that's enough. But Holland didn't know the real fire hadn't come from the match. It was from the video I was about to release. And it wasn't about revenge. It was about closure for me, and maybe for someone else who needed to see who she really was. The idea didn't come from anger. It came from the silence, from all those nights lying awake, wondering if I was crazy, wondering if I had somehow become boring, or if I was just imagining it. Holland never yelled. She never slammed doors. She just disappeared a little more each day, until I was living with a stranger who smiled more at her phone than she did at me. So, no, this video wasn't about revenge. It was survival. I needed my side of the story to be heard, not by her, not by her boyfriend, but by someone who knew what it felt like to be stuck in a life you thought was real, only to find out you were the only one who didn't know you were in the wrong story. I booked a small studio 2 towns over, tucked into a business park. Nothing fancy, just a camera, a stool, and a guy behind the lens who didn't ask questions. I didn't write a script. I didn't rehearse. I just sat down, stared into the camera, and spoke the truth straight, steady. I told how we met. I talked about our wedding, how Holland looked right at me and promised she'd never betray my trust, how she called me her home. I talked about the night she said she was working late, and I sat at the table with dinner getting cold. I talked about the day I realized she'd memorized someone else's body instead of mine. Then I pulled out the photos. I showed the text messages. I even played a voicemail, one where she called him baby, and said she wished I would just sign the papers and disappear. I didn't yell. I didn't swear. I just looked straight into the camera and said she handed me divorce papers like they were a gift. I smiled and said I had a better one. The final shot was a still photo. Holland's boyfriend walking into a middle school auditorium, holding hands with his wife and kids. Across the screen were the words he didn't know either. I uploaded the video privately. No names, no addresses, no faces shown clearly. Everything blurred enough to protect anyone innocent. It wasn't blackmail. It was truth. A clean break, a line drawn. Then I sent it to two people, Holland's boss, the same guy who had invited us to his lake house last 4th of July, and her boyfriend's wife. Then I shut off my phone. That same evening, I checked out of the lodge and drove to my cousin Marlon's place in Montana. Marlon is a carpenter, doesn't own a TV, doesn't bother with social media. I told him I needed a few weeks of quiet. He gave me his guest room and handed me a set of tools. I started sanding wood just to feel something solid under my hands. For the first time in a year, I slept all the way through the night. 3 days later, Marlon walked into the shed with a look that told me the piece was about to end. "You're getting mail, man," he said. "And I'm not talking about junk. People are actually sending you letters." He added, "I checked your old email, too. Looks like a therapist shared your story online. It's taking off." I didn't know how to process that. I never wanted to go viral. I wasn't looking for sympathy or followers. But deep down, a small part of me felt seen. And then I got a message I never expected. It was from Carol. I watched it and I cried. "I'm sorry I left you alone in that marriage," she said. "I should have spoken up years ago. I'm with you now." I didn't know how to answer. What do you even say when someone finally sees the pain you've been living with for years? I typed, deleted, retyped, and finally just sent, "Thank you for seeing me." That night, Marlon and I sat by the fire drinking whiskey, and I told him the whole story. For the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel less of a man because I had been betrayed. I felt clean, like I had finally cut away something that should never have been part of me. But Holland wasn't finished yet. The next morning, Marlon handed me his phone. "She's called my landline 5 times, he said. "Left a message," he added. "She sounds different." I played the voicemail. Her voice was rough, panicked, like the Holland I knew had been replaced by a stranger. "Darian, I know you're angry, but you have to stop. Please. I made mistakes, big ones. But you're ruining lives. People are talking." His wife left. "My job's on the line. I don't know what else you want." I paused the message. That was the thing. There wasn't anything I wanted anymore. But I knew she wasn't calling because she missed me. She was calling because the world she had built on lies was falling apart. And that wasn't my fault. Holland's voice used to be your weapon. Calm, measured, able to argue circles around you and make you feel like you were the crazy one. But the voice in that voicemail was cracking, not trembling for pity, but trembling from the fear of losing control. And Holland without control was like a dancer without music, still trying to perform, but completely out of step. I didn't call her back. I didn't need to. There was nothing left between us. My silence wasn't about running away anymore. It was a boundary, and the harder she hit against it, the more obvious it became. Her power only worked when I let her in. But Holland wasn't used to being ignored. That same afternoon, Carol sent me a screenshot, a Facebook post from Holland, carefully crafted, emotionally loaded, just vague enough to gather sympathy from people who didn't know the truth. Sometimes, even when you give your best, people choose destruction. "Please be kind. You never know what someone's going through." It had over 100 likes, dozens of comforting comments, hugs, prayers, invitations for wine nights. I stared at it for a long time, not with anger, but with pity. Holland wasn't just rewriting history. She was trying to paint herself as the victim, the woman who had been abandoned, betrayed, emotionally scarred by an ungrateful husband. The irony was almost too much. She was still performing, still pretending, but this time the cracks were starting to show. That night, Carol called me. Her voice was tight with anger. "I showed up at Mom's house," Carol said, crying like a teenager. "She said you were trying to ruin her life. I told her to quit the act. You didn't post her name. You didn't expose her. You just let the truth fall where it may, and that's what scares her. You didn't fight back." I didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I answered softly, "Exactly." There was silence between us, heavy and uncomfortable. My head spun with questions, doubts, anger. "Carol, why didn't you tell me sooner?" I finally managed. "I tried," she admitted. "Once early on at your wedding, Holland shut me down immediately, threatened to cut me out of her life. Mom begged me not to say anything, family loyalty. You know, but loyalty shouldn't protect someone like Holland." "You're right," I said slowly, my voice heavy with realization. "She's been dangerous this whole time, hasn't she?" "I never saw it coming," Carol said. "Even when we were kids, Samuel, she was manipulative. Nothing was ever her fault. She played mind games, made me doubt myself constantly. But it got worse as we got older. It wasn't just a bad temper. She knew exactly what she was doing. Jason, her first husband, had a breakdown after she left him. He lost his job, had panic attacks, his life fell apart, and she acted like it was no big deal. Just moved on. My throat went dry. 10 years of marriage, and this was the first I'd heard about Jason. "Wait, I managed again? She was married before me?" "Yeah," Carol said bitterly. "She moved cities before meeting you. New town, new life. She convinced all of us to keep it secret. Said you wouldn't understand. She convinced your entire family to hide her first marriage from me? I almost whispered. Exactly. She told everyone you were controlling, unstable. Same playbook she used on you. But it was all lies. He was a victim, just like you. I took a long, shaky breath. We deserve the truth, I said. Carol sighed deep. I'm sorry I waited so long to tell you, but you deserve to know. We hung up, and I sat alone, staring blankly into the darkness. All these years, I thought Holland was just selfish, maybe cold-hearted, but now I understood she was dangerous, more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. For word's sake, I had spent years trying to prove I was good enough for someone who saw loyalty as weakness and kindness as something to exploit. 2 days later, a courier showed up at Marlon's place with a letter for me. Not a text, not an email, a real letter in Holland's handwriting. Darian, what we had mattered. You were a good man. Maybe you still are. I never stopped appreciating your patience, even when I acted like I didn't. I made huge mistakes, but I want to believe there's still a part of you that remembers how we started. Before the noise, before the silence. I'm asking you to meet me one last time. No drama, no bitterness, just honesty. I read it twice. The last time she'd handwritten anything to me was back in college, doodling hearts in the margins. Now the writing was clean, precise, controlled, calculated. Still, part of me was curious, not hopeful, just curious to see the real Holland now that the curtain had finally fallen. We met at a small cafe by the river, the same place we used to go on lazy Sunday mornings when everything still felt unscripted. She showed up 10 minutes late, dressed like a magazine ad, as if looking perfect could erase the past. She wore sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. When she finally took them off, her eyes weren't sad or apologetic, they just looked tired, worn. She sat down without speaking. I didn't say yes, I replied. I said I'd listen. She nodded, taking a slow breath. I lost everything. Did you? I tilted my head. She blinked. He left. His wife moved out. His boss found out. I've been told to take a leave of absence. I might lose my job. For a second, her voice cracked. I didn't say anything. She stared at me, waiting for comfort or rescue. I stayed still. I thought you'd try to ruin me, she said. I didn't, I said simply. You did it yourself. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger for the first time. You're not the same man, she whispered. No. I stood up. I'm not. You handed me divorce papers like a gift. I smiled because I had a better one. Freedom. I walked away without looking back. Holland stayed sitting there alone, and for once, there was no audience to applaud her performance. As I stepped into the cool air outside, there was no sense of victory, no cinematic music swelling in the background, just the quiet hum of a life moving forward without us. I never turned around. I didn't have to. That chapter had ended not with a bang, but with a quiet truth neither of us could deny. People talk about freedom like it's a doorway you walk through and suddenly everything's brighter. It's not. At first, it's hollow. Waking up without her alarm blaring, making coffee in silence, walking past mirrors, and not recognizing yourself because for so long you measured your worth by how she looked at you, or didn't. Freedom came slowly. It was folding laundry without resentment, deleting old photos without shaking hands, walking into a grocery store and not needing to text anyone about which brand of milk to buy. It was ordinary, but powerful. Still, echoes of Holland's world tried to follow. A week after our meeting, her lawyer sent an email, simple, cold, desperate. She wanted to revise the divorce terms, said she'd signed too quickly. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a last-ditch appeal to reason. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my lawyer with one line. No response necessary. Proceed as planned. Holland never understood. It was never about winning. It was about peace. Peace doesn't come from bargaining with someone who sees every relationship as a transaction. While she pulled legal strings, her world kept falling apart. Marlon texted me a screenshot one morning. Rumors had spread through private circles. Her leave of absence became permanent, her name removed from committee lists. Charity invites stopped coming. She didn't just lose me. She lost the image she had built. I started over. I moved to a small town, got a job consulting for a construction firm that didn't care about resumes, only results. I worked with my hands. I spent time alone without feeling lonely. I started talking to people again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was a woman named Brooklyn who ran the bookstore across from my new place. Smart, sarcastic, completely herself. One day, she handed me a copy of The Art of Letting Go and said, "You look like someone who needs less noise in his head." I laughed harder than I had in years. We didn't start anything right away. I wasn't ready. But the way she looked at me was different, honest, simple, grounded. That's when I realized Holland hadn't destroyed me. She had revealed me, stripped everything away until I could finally see myself clearly. Not as a victim, not as a man scorned, but as someone who once settled for emotional scraps, thinking that was love. It wasn't. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes silence is the sound of a man rebuilding himself one steady brick at a time, without needing anyone's permission. Nearly 5 months had passed since I last saw Holland. No more letters, no more voicemails, no more legal tricks. She vanished from my world like smoke after a fire. I thought that was the end, until one day I got a message from a blocked number. Not a text, a video. I hesitated, but curiosity always wins. She was sitting in a dim hotel room, smeared makeup, not real tears but staged ones. She stared into the camera. Darian, you probably won't watch this whole thing, but I need it recorded. I paused it there. That phrase hit me in the gut. This wasn't for me. It was strategy, documentation. I let it play. She rambled about mistakes, confusion, things spiraling out of control. Then her tone cooled. I need you to confirm I never coerced you, that everything between us was consensual, that I never manipulated or emotionally abused you. My side of the story is ruining my career. People are getting the wrong idea. There it was, not an apology, defense, another attempt to rewrite history. I didn't respond. I documented everything. I sent the video to my lawyer along with every piece of photos, emails, her own texts. My lawyer just shook his head. She's testing you. Don't blink. I didn't. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was detached, watching her sink into a storm she created, still trying to blame the sky. But Holland wasn't done trying. A few days later, Brooklyn showed up at the cafe holding her phone. Someone sent me something about you, she said quietly. It was a private message from a fake account. Vague accusations about you being unstable and controlling. No signature, but the wording, the style, it was Holland. She's not just trying to save herself. She's trying to poison anything good you're building. I gave Brooklyn her phone back and said, she used to be my wife. Brooklyn didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, maybe it's time you wrote your own ending. Those words stuck with me. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I wasn't cleaning up her messes. I was building a life she couldn't reach. 6 months passed. Holland's noise faded into nothing. No more fake accounts, no more messages. Her fire died without oxygen. In me, I rebuilt, slowly, patiently. I painted the kitchen, got back into hiking, adopted an old, loyal mutt named Max. Brooklyn stayed around. We talked, we laughed, we lived without performance. One Sunday, I went to the lake where Holland and I once stood. I pulled the old divorce papers from my jacket and let the wind take them. I didn't watch them sink. I turned around and walked away, toward a life not built from what I lost, but from who I chose to become. I wasn't the man she betrayed. I was the man who survived it. And there's nothing more powerful than realizing that closure doesn't come from getting an apology. It comes from waking up one day, looking in the mirror, and knowing she doesn't own a single piece of me anymore.